Did you know that heat is the #1 killer of transmission fluid, and by extension your entire transmission? Fluid doesn't just go bad over time, it breaks down faster under heat, turning thin and weak until it can't protect the system. In fact, a fluid that looks harmless could already be a sign of damage lurking inside. Stick with me, because I'll show you the color and smell cues that reveal the truth before it's too late. Before we move on, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel and like the video. Imagine opening your transmission dipstick and immediately being able to see the future health of your vehicle. That small plastic handle under the hood isn't just there to check a fluid level. It's holding one of the most accurate predictors of whether your transmission is still strong, on borrowed time, or already dying. Most drivers think transmission fluid is just there for lubrication, the same way engine oil keeps pistons moving smoothly. But that assumption leaves out a critical truth. This fluid holds data. Every mile, every gear change, every spike in temperature leaves evidence right there on the dipstick in front of you. When you pull it out, you're not just checking for full or low. You're reading color, consistency, and smell, all of which tell their own story. Fresh fluid has a bright red or pink tint with a clean, slightly sweet aroma. It's smooth between your fingers, almost silky. Over time, though, that picture changes. Heat, friction, and contamination transform it into shades of brown with a thicker body. If neglected, you'll eventually find it looking nearly black, sometimes with a sharp burnt smell that lingers on your hands. That's when the alarm bells should ring. At that stage, the fluid isn't protecting components, it's announcing their failure. Here's the part that surprises most people. Transmission fluid doesn't get dirty in the same way engine oil does. It isn't filled with soot or fuel residues, but with microscopic particles from the transmission itself. Those fine clutches, soft bands, and gear teeth are slowly wearing down, and their remains end up swirling inside the fluid like glitter you can't quite see until you look closely. Mechanics often describe fluid checks like detective work. A shimmer of metallic dust in the sunlight means friction material is gone. Gears are chewing into themselves, and catastrophic failure is getting closer. It's not guesswork, it's evidence. I've heard plenty of real shop stories that prove this point. A customer comes in for a routine service, thinking everything's fine, and the mechanic pulls the dipstick. Not only is the fluid dark and sticky, but the smell hits them immediately, burnt and sweet like overheated syrup. That one smell tells the technician the car has been running hot long enough to cook the fluid and damage internal seals. In another case, a faint shimmer inside the fluid pan told the mechanic that clutch packs were disintegrating. The owner had no symptoms yet, but the transmission's death had already begun, long before the first gear slip. The fluid color chart often used by professionals makes this easy. Bright pink means the transmission is healthy. A slightly brown tint means service is due. Dark brown with that unmistakable burnt smell means something more serious has already happened behind the scenes. Smell, in fact, often gives away damage much faster than appearance. You might see fluid that looks passable, but if it smells scorched, you know it's no longer protecting anything. Once oxygen, heat, and friction break the fluid's molecules down, it leaves your gears and clutches grinding with almost no cushion. What makes this so dangerous is how easily people miss these early warnings. On the outside, the car often runs completely fine. There's no shaking, no slipping, no warning lights. Meanwhile, inside the transmission, heat cycles are silently breaking down seals or wearing thin the valve body's delicate channels. By the time symptoms show up, it's usually too far gone. A cheap fluid change or filter service that could have prevented damage is replaced with a bill running several $1,000s for a rebuild. That's why a simple dipstick check, something you can do in seconds, can tell you whether your transmission is safe, at risk, or past saving. It's more than a maintenance step. It's an early alert system for one of the most expensive parts of your car. Now that you know how to read the story your fluid is telling, the bigger mystery is why changing that fluid sometimes causes even more harm than leaving it alone. What if the very act of changing your transmission fluid, something you thought would protect your car, ends up being the push that finally breaks it? It sounds backwards, but if you talk to mechanics who see automatic transmissions every day, they'll tell you the horror stories. Cars that drove into the shop running fine left the shop barely able to shift after a fluid service. The paradox is real. Fresh fluid is essential to transmission health. But in some high-mileage vehicles, swapping it in can trigger failure almost overnight. So how does this happen? Think about what's inside that transmission. You've got clutch packs, valve bodies, seals, pumps, and fluid passages that all rely on the right viscosity and friction balance. Over time, the friction surfaces inside wear down. The clutches that once gripped firmly start to get thinner and smoother. The fluid in these cases does more than lubricate. It actually thickens with age, filled with microscopic particles from those same worn components. That sludge-like texture may sound bad, but it can temporarily mask damage by creating a kind of sticky environment. In a strange way, the dirty fluid acts like a bandage, holding everything together. Now picture what happens when you drain that out and pour in brand new fluid. The old fluid behaved almost like honey. It was thick and heavy, helping worn parts cling together. The new fluid is more like water. Suddenly, the transmission loses that artificial grip, and those clutches that were surviving on friction just start to slip. The driver might notice slipping between gears, delayed engagement when shifting from park into drive, or a sudden jerking movement that wasn't there before. What feels like a service that should have extended the transmission's life can instead expose every weakness it had been hiding. But there's another side to this too. When you perform a full transmission flush on a high-mileage car, the process stirs up everything lurking at the bottom of the pan. Decades of debris, metal filings, and burnt friction material get forced through delicate passageways designed for clean fluid only. Mechanics warn about valve bodies clogging, pumps seizing, or pressure dropping right after a flush. The irony is that the flush itself didn't create damage. It just uncovered the fact that the transmission was already damaged beyond the safety net of dirty fluid. Marketing makes the situation worse. Many modern cars came with lifetime fluid claims in the owner's manual. That phrase tricks a lot of owners into never thinking about it until the vehicle has passed 100,000 or even 150,000 miles. By that time, the system is so dirty and fragile that a sudden service is like shocking the transmission with conditions it can't handle. If the fluid had been changed in smaller, regular intervals earlier in life, the system could have survived without a problem. But waiting too long creates a setup where no choice is good. Leave the bad fluid in and risk irreversible wear, or change it and risk immediate failure. That's why the safest approach in questionable situations is often the partial drain and fill with a filter replacement. Instead of blasting old debris throughout the system, you gradually introduce fresh fluid to mix with what's still there. Done in stages, it prevents the transmission from losing its entire cushioning effect at once. A full flush, on the other hand, is best suited for transmissions that already have relatively clean fluid and no signs of burning, slipping, or metallic shimmer. In those cases, new fluid extends life. In neglected cases, it often ends it. The truth is, your transmission's condition depends less on the next service and more on the pattern of care it's received over its lifetime. Skipping regular checks lets small issues grow into costly failures. That's why consistency matters more than any single fluid change. So here's your task. Pull that dipstick today. Look at the color, feel the texture, and notice the smell. Those quick checks reveal more than warning lights ever will. Remember, a 5-minute inspection that costs nothing could prevent a $4,000 rebuild later. The question is, will you act before it's too late?